Hello, everyone, and welcome to SecurIT, where we normally, and I repeat, normally discuss all things cybersecurity, people, trends, and products. While I thank you for joining us on our continuing journey, I did say normally because today we take a fork in the road, or more like a twist in the road. Our guest today had reached out to us in response to a recent need for guest presenters. And we really enjoyed our initial conversation. She's a researcher, an author, a visiting scholar, an adjunct professor, a guest lecturer, and a speaker on all things, including digital disruptions, 21st century careers, trends, workplace perspectives, and a lot more. And I am itching to start the conversation. Welcome, Dr. Tracey Wilen.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me on your
This
program.
is going to be fun. Usually we talk cybersecurity, but today it's going to be even bigger and better. It's going to be technology and people. As I was preparing for this conversation, so often, as with any good business executive, not that I claim to be a good business executive, um, sometimes I go through these cycles of, hey, people matter or process matters, and you purvey, or I purvey from these different bags, saying, okay, let's focus only on the process, and we can throw any kind of people in through, and we'll get the right result. Or forget about the process. You need rock stars, and um, we'll talk about this. But first, let's begin with you, because part of the success of this podcast is that we have people here who are looking to get into technology. We have CISOs, CIOs, and CTOs who talk about technology. You're going to help us navigate the people aspect of that. And I want to start with you. So let's talk about three major career milestones that got you here, Tracy. And the idea is to get your origin story.
Sure. I guess the first one was really just moving from the East Coast to West Coast and working in Silicon Valley. And eventually I got myself a job at Apple Computer. And it was mind blowing for me because here I was in fashion magazines in New York in the media industry. And I thought that was pretty glamorous, but life was completely different in Silicon Valley. It was very invigorating, intellectual, challenging, fast paced, and mind blowing. And I think that just started me on this journey is I'm not going to leave. I am so hooked on working in Silicon Valley. Apple Computer itself was pretty addicting. So the second area is global business travel. I got into Apple, but I got a crazy job in manufacturing, international manufacturing that nobody wanted to do. Um, and I ended up traveling the world. And I remember saying, I can't believe this company is sending me all over the world in business class at that time. And I'm only in my 20s. And this is crazy. This is like amazing. Um, but one of the things that happened is I was commuting to Japan a lot because one of my roles in manufacturing was Japanese manufacturing monitors. And the Japanese men were not comfortable with Western women doing business there. With a colleague of mine, we co wrote a book that said Doing Business with Japanese Men, a handbook for women.
Huh.
So that business travel just opened up this new door to writing books that became bestsellers that opened up media interviews and speaking that I had never expected. So that just sort of snowballed while I was working. And the third one I would fit in is continuous education. One of the benefits of working for some companies, as you know, is tuition reimbursement. And that first company I worked for, Apple, said, you're never going to get anywhere in Silicon Valley unless you get some advanced degrees, business and engineering degrees. So I opted for the business track and I went for an MBA and then I went for a doctorate. And then eventually Stanford contacted me to be a visiting scholar because I had published all these books, had the global background and the research background. And that opened up another channel for future, which is like teaching and strategy roles at companies, having this more advanced. So it's really snowballed together a lot of different things that created where I am today. And today I have my own business since 2013. It is a speaking consulting business, and pretty much corporations retain me for conferences or offsites to really talk about the future of work, leadership, careers, sometimes education in a digital world.
An amazing story that I'm not going to let go of so easily as I'm itching to get into the meat of the conversation. But let's talk about career extremes, fashion and New York to technology and Silicon Valley. Both ends, both extremes of the same spectrum, so to speak, high energy, leading edge, um, and Apple um, at a time in Japan when things are white hot and people think that Japan's going to conquer the world. Why the move? You're having fun in New York, and you pick another
Yeah.
high stress environment.
Well, unfortunately, we have a very small family. I have my parents, a brother, and just grandparents. And one of my grandmothers got Alzheimer's at a very young age, but she was about 50. And eventually, my grandfather passed. And so my parents had to caretake her. And she was getting worse and worse, running around the streets of New York and couldn't remember anything. And so they found that the best care was in the Bay Area. So they said, "Hey, look, we're going to retire out there. You've got a brother out there already. It's your only brother, in school. So we think, it would be wise if you came along because the rest of my family lives overseas." And I was kicking and screaming, saying, "I really don't want to do this. I do have this, glamorous life in Manhattan, this Vogue and GQ, goodness gracious." But I went along. And I think the horrifying thing is I couldn't get a job. I went out because I had no technology background and I was working gigs, like retail gigs and hospitality gigs. And someone said to me, "Sign up with a temp agency, take any job they'll give you, like the front desk, learn the computers, and then get your way over to Apple to get the temp job to get in." And that's what I had to do. I
Wow.
basically had to start all over again and get in. And that's why I ended up in manufacturing because nobody wanted manufacturing and nobody wanted international manufacturing. But I thought it was great.
And safe to say
It
you
was,
feed off that energy. East
yeah,
Coast or
well,
West?
it's survival. It was just
Amazing.
survival. I had to survive.
Amazing. You alluded to writing a book for women to navigate through all things Japanese, and we'll talk a little more about the books you've written. Um, I'm anxious to know about the educational and intellectual side of your career. So yes, Apple was instrumental in getting you back, um, be behind a desk, so to speak. And as I was introducing you, we talked about, visiting scholar, adjunct professor, guest lecturer, speaker. So you've kept academia in the loop constantly. Can you tell us a little more about that piece of your career, your interaction between your professional career and all things academic?
Sure. So I guess it was, I took the MBA with Apple at night. So you had to do it at night and weekends. You weren't allowed to take off during the day. And I was already in the rhythm and I saw how my mind expanded by continuing getting degrees. And then I continued with some certifications, whatever Apple wanted me to take. And then I said, I really should take a doctorate degree because my Japan book was my MBA project. And I got very addicted to that speaking, writing. And figured out that I'll be more credible if I get a doctorate degree. And unfortunately, Apple had a layoff. So I had to scramble and landed at Hewlett Packard. And Hewlett Packard, again, put me in manufacturing. And I said, "But you know what? I want to continue writing books and the doctoral degree because Apple was so supportive of that." And they said, "Absolutely not."
Oh wow.
I was horrified. But you don't expect that in Silicon
Mhm.
Valley. And so I was like, okay. And this little company came up out of nowhere called Cisco Systems. And they said, well, we're kind of interested in your manufacturing background, and we don't mind that you want to go to school, and we don't mind that you want to write books, but hopefully you'll help write books for us. As long as you do it nights and weekends, that's always the deal, nights and weekends. And so that's when I continued on the doctoral degree and then continued to write the books because you need to do research projects when you're taking a doctoral degree. And when that was done, I said, well, I still am so used to being in school and night and weekends, I might as well teach. And so a lot of the Bay Area schools said, yeah, we have adult learners. They're taking their BA, they're taking their MBA. And so I said, sure, I'll teach international business or women at work. And so that's how I continue with that. So Stanford came on the scene because they were looking for local researchers who were using the internet in some unique way to service underserved communities. And so I had been aligned with a university in Mexico that was delivering education. And I teamed up with a doctor in Mexico to deliver healthcare information to underserved communities. And Stanford was very interested in that project. So they invited me to come over, continue that research, and then that just evolved from there. So I think continuous learning is a need to do. It's not like a nice to do. And that's part of what, whether you're in accounting, medical, whatever your field is, you just have to keep up.
True. And in your case, it's also a want to do. You enjoy this, and your passion shows.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's just amazing. There's so much out there in the world to learn from. And so, but the teaching part helped me realize that a lot of people are scared of technology. They don't know how to understand difficult concepts. And that was something that I thought maybe if I could help break things down with a little bit of humor, a little bit of visuals, a little bit of storytelling, maybe I could help people adjust and welcome technology rather than get scared of it or feel alienated by it.
So, one more short, quick question on your origins, and then I promise we'll dig into the topic at hand. Dr. Tracy Wilen, what's your superpower?
Oh, active listening. So I had a hearing impediment growing up, and it wasn't really looked at or corrected until I was about 18. And so as a result, I had to really listen and watch people very hard and re-ask questions to make sure I heard what they had to say. And as a result of that, what I didn't realize is that I got very good at listening to people. And that's why all my books are interviews with people because I got very good at just asking questions and helping, and then same thing with teaching, it's working with students. So I would say active listening is probably the first one. The second one is I'm very organized.
So,
Can't get through life without
well,
without
true, but in your
organized.
case, both nature and nurture have developed your listening skills. Excellent. Thank you for that. So, let's talk about what you do or the heart of your speaking career. And I've gone through a few videos, and we'll make sure to put your website on the show notes. But it's really very simple. Tracy, spelled Tracey. Wilen is Wilen.com. And you talk about a few things, and we're going to take this in bite-sized pieces. So you're right. People approach technology cautiously, um, and everyone does. Whether it's the vendors that are purveying the technology, whether it's this middle ecosystem, the middleware that's got to now deliver this to potential businesses and to end customers. And then, of course, there are the customers too that are like, oh my gosh, how many new buttons do I have to hit and how fast? And so, generally, technology, while it's intended to make our lives easier, the adoption process isn't always easy. And then add to that factors like AI, um, fast moving technological trends, add to that risk mitigation, and it becomes a very complex world. I want to take the first part of this and kind of try to fit in what you talk about. You talk about digital disruption, and you talk about a fourth disruption. Now, um, I'd love for you to talk about this. In my opinion, the way I've talked about it often on the show is that I've said like I feel like the first major disruption, and yes, you can say technological disruption, was the invention of the printing press. Before the printing press, God whispered in the chief priest's ear, and then the chief priest delivered to us, his interpretation of God's wisdom. Um, Along came the printing press, and now we've got Bibles and Qurans and Torahs, and we've got this whole slew of information and the Word of God in it. So, yeah, sorry for that. And so that was the first major disruption and orders of magnitude change in terms of technology. I believe the second one was the actual development of the steam engine. Um, Now we weren't moving people by force out of Africa and Asia and Europe to work in cotton fields in the US and everywhere else, because now we had engines that could replace that. And then, of course, now technology, right? So given that framework that I have worked with, I'm curious and excited to learn about your perspective on this fourth disruption that you talk about.
Sure. So, I follow the World Economic Forum and I look and watch all the videos every year, always hoping to go one year. And it struck me a couple of years ago that the World Economic Forum said we are now in the fourth industrial revolution, and that this revolution is unlike any previous revolution because it's dealing with technologies that we can't see, that we can't feel, that we can't touch. And therefore, like AI and Internet of Things and big data. And because of that, humanity can't cope. And it was a very daunting message. And I said, you know what? We are actually addicted to technology. How many people do you know today that don't have a mobile smart device or a computer? Right. And so I said, really, I think humanity is driving the use of these technologies. I mean, let's face it, Amazon Prime is like everybody wants it faster and, quicker. People, would be lost without a lot of their digital devices or social media. So I actually think that humanity is driving companies to create more of these things, and they're embracing it, and they want it easier and faster. So I don't look at it as a daunting concept at all. I look at it as technology is helping us ease our lives. The part that I do agree with the World Economic Forum is that we need to continually skill, because the skills that we needed yesterday are changing a little bit. And I do see companies bringing in programs. How now the big one is, how do you do a prompt so that you can do artificial intelligence? So I think it is important that we have to try things. I say, get your hands dirty, try the technology, get comfortable with it, and you'll be addicted. We're already addicted to it.
True. And in terms of making things easy, I'm going to date myself. If I wanted to listen to my favorite track of, a certain artist, um, I'd have to use a cassette tape and fast forward and roll back and look at a little counter till I got to the right track and be able to enjoy. Let me go all out and date myself here. Tracy Dancing Queen by ABBA, right? So, however, today's customer is able to walk into a room and, you know, summon the spirits, so to speak, in the name of Siri and Alexa and say, hey, play my favorite song, right? And out it
Yep.
pops. So you're right. Technology does change this. And the next big step is to validate me. Why do I need 20-digit passwords when you can look at my face, the way I type, and figure out who I am and let me through to the data that I want? So well stated. And then thanks for that interesting sample of that conversation. More on your website, tracywilen.com. Um, you also alluded to the second piece, which was talking about writing a book on women and interacting in Japan. Um, you talk about change in leadership, right? And then I figured that change in leadership conversation has to do with the facet of he- dealing with women, leading women, women leading the workforce, etc. Give us about 30 seconds to a minute on that conversation.
Well, I think the leadership piece comes in because of the extreme longevity, which is something I talk
You
about.
do. You
That
actually talk about living to be 100.
Yeah, well, actually, the oldest person is
Wow.
122. An adult today could live to 120. A baby born today could live to 150. But most of us cannot wrap our heads around that concept of living longer. And so I went out and asked over 200 executives, what does it mean to you as a leader, right? If you're going to live, just say to 100. And a lot of them said to me, you know what, Tracy, if I'm going to live to 100, I'm going to have to afford to live to 100. And if I'm going to have to afford to live to 100, I'm going to have to stay educated enough, skilled enough, have to stay current enough. And I'm probably going to have to work until I'm 85. So that's mind blowing from an individual point of view. On the corporate side, they say, we're seeing it. We used to have 3 generations in the workforce. Now we have 4 generations in the workforce. Nope, now we have 5 generations in the workforce. McDonald's tells me their youngest employee is 14 and a half on a part time permit. And Walmart tells me their oldest employee is 101, is a gardener. So this is to me the new leadership complexities, in addition to having, the whole spectrum of gender. But how do we deal with 5 generations in the workforce that come in with very different educational backgrounds, technology backgrounds, business backgrounds, leadership expectations, and views of work? And so that's where I think is the new dilemma for leadership today in companies. And, who is the most positioned to really lead? And so that is one of the books I had. It's called Women Lead, because as I went out to many generations and executives, we found that Generation X and Y um, really embraced women leaders. And really, it was the older generation boomer men that were more resistant. And so that, and the quality is really about the qualities, the listening qualities, the way the leadership style, the inclusiveness, and some of those characteristics. It was a long research study, so I won't get into all the details. But that to me is more of the core is we're living longer. We have to figure this out. We have to lead this very complex world now of many generations from and diversity and globalized. And how do we do that?
We are, and fascinating. I wish we had another hour just to talk about, um, the various facets of the workforce. And I want to push that a little more with you as a subject matter expert. Now, we as humans are quick to judge, and I'm not being facetious. We like things containerized, is my favorite word, and put in a box and wrapped to the bow. So if you see a guy walking down the road with a couple of, tattered clothes and poor footwear and a hair mess, we're generally quick to say, look, he's down in life or homeless. And if you see another guy well dressed, it's signs of success. So it's our make it amygdala. It's our reptilian brain that wants a sense of security, and therefore we're quick to judge and put people in boxes. And I'm just going to stay with people and not situations at the moment because we're talking generation. um my question to you is, um we are erratic, Tracy. We're people. We are high one day and low another. It depends on what side of the bed we woke up from. It depends on how we interact with others, and how your husband or wife was feeling, or did you get the right breakfast, or road rage during traffic. And so you put all this together, and a certain person, employee, shows up for the day, right? Depending on how the weekend went and whatever else. um And part of being human is this fun of having to work and interact and change, um, as you're dealing with your coworkers. Um, I take that both as a challenge and highly interactive and a little bit of fun. Yet all our systems and all our processes and every single script says, let's try to put people in boxes.
Mm.
And there's a book written by Dr. Larry Little, and he divides the world into lions and camels and turtles and monkeys. It's a beautiful book, and it takes on the basics of doing a disc analysis. The dominant and the social and the competitive competent. So we do these personality tests. We have performance indicators to say high and low performers. And everywhere it's all about putting people in neat little boxes. You've referred to generations, talk about the baby boomers and the great generation, and, you know, millennials and the Gen X and the Gen Y. And boy, are we running out of alphabets. So at the end of this, having created this framework for you, dare I ask you, how the heck do we navigate this? Do we need these boxes? Um, you know, what are the few things that we need as we navigate people and the workforce?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a story. I joined a corporation and I was a vice president of a sales overlay group, and our job was really to conduct research. So, and in order to do that, I needed a certain caliber of talent, advanced degree researchers with PhDs, and I couldn't find that locally. And so I decided to create a business unit. It had about 72 people at the time, virtual. And people were not doing virtual, hybrid, or anything at that time. But because I had to figure out where these great people were. And it ended up that it was 5 generations in my business unit. The way that we worked together was everybody wants a purpose, everybody wants the goal, everybody wants to know what I need to do and how do I get rewarded for that and how do I get ahead. And we taking out all of the generational stuff and all of the boxes and the buckets because they didn't even know each other. And I would really go out of my way to create, ways that we could meet each other. And we did well. And in fact, I had asked them, is there anything that you'd like to do as a researcher that you haven't done, like a bucket list? And they all said they wanted to write a book. And that became one of our largest, most successful team projects. That's where the women's lead book came in because it supported the business. Another thing I did with my team, which I recommend to other people, is that we would get together at the end of the year, celebrate the holidays. And I would say, go around the table and tell me 3 tasks in your job that you hate, and like a secret Santa kind of swap. If somebody wants that task, you can take it. You just have to train them on the task. And so we each were offloading things that we didn't like and found out that other people liked some of the things that we hated. And actually, one woman emerged. I had no idea that she was like a bookkeeper accountant, and she wanted to do all the math in the books, and we had no idea that she had this skill. So that was sort of a fun thing that we did together. And the other thing is, I took out job titles. I just called everybody a project manager and told them make up a business card and put on your business card what you identify as. Do you identify as a writer? Do you identify as an editor? It doesn't matter to me. What we got to do is get these deliverables done on time within budget, and then we can have success. So it was a very different approach. It was probably not, something that people are too comfortable doing, but we had a blast. It was a great team, really great team.
Awesome. That sounds like that's a fun project. I got to keep that one in mind. Let's talk about the books. You're a prolific author, half a dozen at least. I didn't have time to count them all. Tell us a little bit about the range of books that you've written, please.
Sure. So, I'm going to tell you, I hate book writing.
Whoa.
I
Okay, I
really,
would have never guessed.
yeah, yeah. I have
Uh-huh.
13 and they're a necessary evil. to get on the radio and TV and speech circuit. And so in the beginning, yes, I did the book on Japan. And then a lot of women reached out and said, can you do more books on where we travel? And I was traveling all over. So I did on Asia and Europe. And then when I joined Cisco, we started to change the focus of the books towards technology. So technology in higher education, technology. And then when I joined the last company, we redirected again. So there's 13 books out there now. Had I had AI, ChatGPT, I probably would love writing, right? Because that would have been my editor. I would have written it better, faster, more of them with more clarity and had a lot more fun. But I do not like writing and I need heavy editorial oversight. What I really like is the speaking part and getting the message out. And unfortunately, they didn't have podcasts at that time. So the way you get to the media, the way you get to people was through books. So I haven't published since 2018. I actually stopped during COVID. And I don't know if I'll go back. I don't know.
Still,
This is more fun.
I hear you, and 13 is impressive. I stand corrected. It wasn't a half dozen, it was a baker's dozen. So well done. Um, let's move on to to finish this very interesting conversation. Back to you. And these next set of questions, some of them, are longer than the rapid fire. I'll come to the rapid fire in a minute. But let's talk about Tracy. Usually the first question I ask my guests at this section of the program is, what's your superpower, which I did already. I do have to say, I do feel heard on this as we're talking. You do listen well. So that definitely, is your well-honed superpower. Let me ask you this. If you had a billboard, that's the question. A meaningful thought, a quote, or a saying that you have.
Immerse and disperse or big home and go home.
Wow.
Go big or go home.
Very nice.
Immerse and disperse is more of I find projects, I go deep very quickly, very fast. And if it doesn't work, abandon.
Okay.
Don't hang on to doing things that you cannot stand doing. Or like go big or go home, which is again, put your all in it. And if it doesn't work, move
What
on.
was the
And
the
that
first word before disperse? The mic cut off. Oh,
immerse, immerse yourself.
immerse or disperse. I like it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So all or nothing, 100%. That's neat. Um, any career setbacks or life lessons to get you where you are?
Well, I'm very business oriented and financial, and I always reflect. This is a silly story, but it's true. When I was working at Apple, they had a layoff, uh, and 3,500 of us in my division were let go, and that was unfortunate, and because I really embodied it and really immersed in the culture. But we had stock options, and they were underwater, and I didn't have any money set aside because I was going to school and I was trying to buy a condo and just trying to get through life in Silicon Valley. And I had knew that Apple one day would make it, but my stock was priced. The options were like 50, $60,
Wow.
and the stock was like 4 cents or something. And I think in retrospect, I should have tried to get the money to buy my option because life would have been a lot easier.
Apple
And I know
now.
that sounds a little tacky, but I always sit back and say, I wish I had bought those somehow.
Look at Apple today, huh? Far away
Yeah,
from
right. Split five
yep.
times since then.
um, what are you excited about? Passion projects? You alluded to purpose earlier, right? We were talking about people and categorizing them, and it was well said that we all want to belong and we all want purpose. How about you? What are you excited about? Do you have any passion projects at the moment?
I think actually the speaking is going to be the most exciting for me because my what I do with my speech is I incorporate video. It's very physical speech. I engage with people. and I try to make sure everyone leaves learning something and feeling good. And it's more like a teacher's approach to the program. And that just excites me. And I love when people come to me and say, "Well, do you understand my industry? Can you give me as someone just did on the power industry or the building industry or the healthcare industry?" And that's interesting to me because that helps me research more, learn more about it, and keep that whole cycle of learning and excitement moving ahead. That's still what I like. Had I not been given that opportunity years ago, uh, I don't know if I would have found the speaking as a career.
You do it, you fit naturally into the speaking career. And we talked about your website. And if people do, and I urge people to go there to look at snippets of your video presentation. But if someone wants to know more about you or book you for a speaking session, where do they find you?
Basically, they can go, LinkedIn, of
Of course.
course, Tracy Weilen on LinkedIn, or the website, tracywilen.com, and we'll respond.
Awesome. So let's finish with a few
Good.
rapid fire. You get to give me the answer or pass. Okay. I just
Okay.
want quick thoughts on, let's go with the easy ones first. Books, besides yours, of course. Any great books you've read or refer to?
Oh, well, I like tech books. I like longevity books. I just read
Oh,
Outlive,
nice.
and I like sometimes a thriller, Lucy Foley, sometimes,
Cool. So quite the
but
range.
mostly it's business and tech books.
Music.
I like popular women artists. I grew up like Madonna was my age, so I like Lady Gaga, and I like some rhythm and blues like Amy Winehouse, Booker T, things like
Very nice.
little
Good. Quite
jazz
the
as
range.
well.
Religion.
Religion, I think, I used to feel was important to set morals and ethics. Corrupt religion, unfortunately, I feel has taken over and really alienated people. And I just don't really have an opinion anymore on religion because it seems to be dividing people, and it's a sad state.
I couldn't agree with you more as we see the effects of what you just said on future generations. Uh,
Yep,
I agree. Politics.
it's a circus. It's a joke. I'm sorry. It's embarrassing. It's sad that we can't get aligned. It's so sad that the US is such a great country and we can't get aligned.
So we are talking US politics.
I'm
As
talking
far
US politics because that we're supposed to be better off than rest of the world rather than than going global and traveling globally. This is one thing I used to say to my students. 'Cause they were always complaining about, "Oh, I don't Silicon Valley, oh, it's all greed and all this stuff." And I said, "You should really travel the world." And I've been to over 75 countries now and spent time there and look at the politics and look at the lifestyle and look at the freedoms and then come back to me and tell me, is it better here or is it better somewhere
Amen.
else?
Um, so one of my bucket lists was to take our kids to all seven continents. So while I'm going to go off script, best continent or best country or best city you've ever visited.
Okay. So the most disturbing, in my face, memorable was Ethiopia.
Interesting. I
I had to
can
go
see
over
that.
there for work with the government, and and I asked for a tour just so I could see the people. And it was a contrast because it was so sad and poor. People are starving and dying, and visibly, and they were so hopeful about religion that they were very very Catholic and very optimistic. And, a lot of us come back, you couldn't sleep or eat for a few days because it was so mind-boggling. The most dramatic country, I think, Iceland was just beautiful, and just the nature and parts of it. Um, there really isn't a country that I don't like. I think I'm very blessed that I've been able to go to so many, and I would keep going, and going, as long as there's opportunities there. I do prefer the business travel than the tourism travel because I like getting into the system. But, yeah.
Well,
How about you? Did you have a
oh, yes,
favorite?
I did, but I see it. Well stated on Ethiopia. I haven't been, but the juxtaposition of both extremes, happiness as well as the lack of resources. Well stated. That's interesting. For me, I think the best kept secret was South America. Just a
Yeah.
happy people who pretty much the world is left alone for the most part. And there's some beautiful, beautiful kind of places to visit. For me, Cusco, close to Lima and on the way to Machu Picchu was my number one, just for pure
Ne
happiness, and nothing else. Just people, great people, friendly people, good food. Just a nice, happy place. Historical figures, Doctor Weiland.
So so I tend to be more in the moment. So I'll give you a pair. I always, admire Charlie Munger, who has passed, and Warren Buffett, who is
Yep,
alive. So it's not just
those names
historical.
are synonymous.
Yes, so them. And then on the flip side, my past neighbor Herman, who lived to 101, taught me a lot of wisdom. He was very sharp till he passed. And I pair him with Rupert Murdoch, who is alive at 93. His winery is close to where I live in LA, and I've had the fortunate experience of going over and chatting with him. And Herman's and Rupert's concept on longevity were very similar, which is, keep active, read, work if you can, healthy, and exercise and social. And they both had the same attitudes and concepts of longevity, although Herman was a shoe salesman from Chicago and Rupert is, a
Yep,
major player in the media
publications.
world.
Yep. The winery you're referring to, I'm assuming is the San Antonio winery, or is it another? Oh,
Moraga.
Mirage. Okay, okay.
Moraga in
Uh,
Bel Air. It's very unusual to have a
in
winery
Bel
in
Air,
LA.
yes, of course.
Yeah.
San Antonio being the other one, and their claim to success was the only winery in LA that could actually was allowed uh, to you know supply wines to the Catholic Church during Prohibition. And yeah,
Oh,
it's a little
interesting.
winery near downtown, and you should visit because they've got the best little cafeteria in there. Last but not least, only because this was a milestone in your life, grandma, and you came to LA, you came to NorCal, but lessons from grandma.
So I had 2 grandmothers. I was very fortunate. So the grandmother, the Irish grandmother, what I call my grandmother from Ireland who got Alzheimer's, we didn't have too many conversations. My other grandmother lived to 92 and she was very sharp, lived in Queens, New York, very like an accountant bookkeeper, very pragmatic. And I remember she got cancer and she would say to me, come visit me and come call me. And here's a lesson, Tracy, that I want you to remember as you get older, your circle, your social circle decreases. So it becomes more and more important to have your family interact with you and socialize with you. And in fact, Tracy, I would rather you come see me and call me than come to my funeral because it does me absolutely no use for you to come to my funeral.
Wise, wise
And
lady.
unfortunately, yeah, she passed away, if you could believe it, on September 10th, the night before 9/11. And she was living in Florida at that time, and so it was nobody could fly. And so they, had to postpone her funeral. I did not get there because my parents could get permission to go because they're,
Right.
first. So she sort of fulfilled what she said, "Don't bother coming to the funeral
And
because I won't
wish
miss
it
you."
all. Deep, deep. Thank you so much. This was a ton of fun. And we'll make sure to put all the links that we promised in the show notes so people can find you. And I look forward to future interactions and actually being present at one of your presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us on this episode of Secure IT as I continue the conversation with people vendors, end users, teachers in this case, of all things related to technology, helping us to learn from their insights, knowledge, and experiences. You know the routine by now. Follow us wherever your favorite podcasts are hosted. And please do direct message me on LinkedIn, Twitter, also known as X, with feedback, questions, comments, and complaints. Thanks again, everyone, and see you next month.